Dave Millis is our speaker this evening. He tells me he's been a serious collector since 1971 for 50 years. Of course, like me, he collected when he was a child, just picking up pretty stones, I guess, at that time.
Right, whatever.
But in our Kraken cab, we have two versions, thanks to our editor. This is payback time, considering I sort of started the board meeting, but then I really didn't get it started the way it should have been. But anyways, so we changed his name from Dave Millis to Dick Millis, and that's his brother, his evil brother, I guess. Evil twin, right. So I know you may have two versions that you'd like to. This is for posterity, this one here, Dick Millis.
When's the collector's item?
It's a collector's item, it's probably worth a lot of money in 20 years. But as I say, Dave's been a speaker at our club several times. He's been a leader for field trips for not just our club, but the Wayne County Club and also with the Shahana Club in Pennsylvania. And so he's been around the pike a few times. He's better known for collecting 123,000 fish in Florida. He's written a book, but he hasn't had it published yet. So, without any ado, Dave Millis.
Save your hands until later. You may not want to do that.
We'll take it back later.
I'll tell you a couple more things about myself, seeing how this might end up on Facebook. I have a PhD out of Clarkson. I have a couple of master's degrees. I've been fishing since I was about old enough to stand, and that's my main hobby. And 123,000 fish to 4 months for the park. You want to work that out, a lot of fish every day. But started in rock collecting in '71. That was with a trip to Ellenville, where I found some galena and some quartz crystals. And well, being a real novice, that was just the start. And over most of the country, rock collecting. Written books about rock collecting in Ontario, Canada, New York, and in the Lordsburg, New Mexico area of the country. And those are field guides for where we actually collected and where there still is stuff. Although the eastern stuff tends to have problems with current events. But, so anyway, I've been rock collecting a lot, and I've been also speaking a lot. Back in the 90s, there were field trips about my trips out west to collect rocks, and I thought those got pretty boring. So since then, I put together at least 12, possibly as many as 15 unique programs. Been trying to give one a year, but obviously because of the virus, I didn't give one last year. As a matter of fact, this one has been postponed 3 times. This is our 4th try at giving this program, and it's about pegmatites. And seeing how it's as old as it is, I'm going to be fragmented and I'll be jumping around a little bit, but I will try to get through it as best as I can. Now, the first thing we should talk about is what is a pegmatite. And in all cases, we're talking about something that has a molten rock content to start with. And there are a lot of molten rocks around. The basic molten rock that's extremely large would be called a pluton. And it would be something that would rise up but not reach the surface and cool underground and be large. In the case of like the Sierra Mountains in the California and Oregon, there are so many plutons so close together, called a batholith. If you get smaller than a pluton, they use words that laccolith, hypobismal, and other things that I have no idea what they are, but I do know that no matter which one you pick, there's a gray area between them. There's no cutoff between a pluton to a batholith. There's no cutoff between plutons and laccoliths. You just, whatever you want to call it at the time. Now, those are all igneous rocks. They tend to cool so that the crystal size is about 1/4 of an inch. However, there are intrusive rocks and it cools slowly underground. And it turns out that the pegmatite needs a little help because it performs incredibly large crystals. The grain size of granite would be considered coarse, but these are extremely coarse. And it turns out from reading that I found out that most of the really good pegmatites are located in an area where there's some metamorphosis going on, and so there's a prolonged period of heat and pressure while not altering the pegmatite. It just provides the extra heat and time for those crystals to grow extremely large. Okay, that's basically what a pegmatite is. And now, when a pegmatite finally cools and you get these large crystals, whatever's in there is what you get. And I'll just point out a few things to you here because most of the good pegmatites have a lot of feldspar and quartz in them. Well, not much you can do with quartz, but on this periodic chart over here, the important ones are these three and these three. And we'll talk about all of them. They are lithium and beryllium. That doesn't form feldspars. Then we have the sodium and potassium. This is the orthoclase series of feldspars. And then you got the sodium to calcium here for the plagioclase series of feldspars. We'll talk about these in more detail in a little bit. And then you have the magnesium in here that gets mixed in with this. And over here, somewhere is iron. And iron screws up everything, but where's the irons? You see anybody?
Looks like top center.
Right there, iron, okay. Also, there's another one over here that's very important, is aluminum and oxygen. And perhaps the oxygen is one of the most important. And the aluminum is essential for some of the finest quality feldspars. And we'll come back to these in a little bit. But as far as pegmatites go, historically, the value in a pegmatite was originally in the muscovite mica. And you see the house over here that made out of mica. It's in the display case. That muscovite mica was worth a lot of money back around 1817 when they started to mine it in this country. And it was used for windows, and when they finally invented the kerosene lantern, because they had kerosene, it was used in the kerosene lanterns. It was also used in a number of other places, and I might somewhere around here find a list of what other things that mica was used for, but at that time, it was 5 cents a pound for good muscovite mica, which is a lot of money today. Anyway, that mica was the value of the pegmatites. Nobody used much of anything else there. Now, historically, as the mica became less valuable because the feldspar became more valuable, the Chinese were making something that were very nice dishes made out of feldspar, and they were called china. In case you're wondering why that heirloom you have at home is called china, because the Chinese were the first to make high quality ceramic dishes and things out of the high quality pegmatite feldspars. And there's a lot more money in the feldspars than there is in any gems that you'll ever find in these pegmatites. But I'll get back to the feldspars in a little bit. But then eventually, what became just as important was beryllium and lithium. They make very high quality parts that cannot be made with any of the other things. Beryllium is particularly used in the aircraft industry for all sorts of things. I have a list. If I find it, I'll read it to you. And lithium, you know about lithium batteries. They last a long time. They contain a lot of power, and they weigh a heck of a lot less than the lead storage batteries in your car. So those things turned out to be more valuable than any of the other stuff, including the gems. Okay, so that's a general overlook of what I'm going to be talking about now, and I'll try to find out where I'm supposed to be talking about mica, and we'll start with the mica here, and talk about the size of pegmatites and other things later, but first of all, I want to do, Mike, it looks like I've done this page as well. Okay. This is all about feldspar here. So it'd be nice if I could find that list of mica and close mica out. Got all kinds of notes here, just organized. I know for a fact that mica is used for electrical insulators, used for insulation. Actually, they grind it up and put it in cosmetics so you get sparkles on your face, although right now they're using mylar, not mica anymore. Don't have much luck here. All right, well, I'll come back to the mica if I happen to bump into it. And I'll give you all of the rest of them that were in there. There's a few I didn't mention that I can't remember right off the top of my head. So somewhere in the 1800s, what happened was that the Industrial Revolution got rolling. About that time, Europe started producing fine china. And the Americans, when we finally got some extra spending money, stopped making dishes that were this thick and started making fine china ourselves. And that was around 1900, which happens to be in coincidence with about the same time when those pegmatites in southern Maine became the rage of the country. Since then, of course, now we have pegmatites all over the world. There are millions of pegmatites, but there's also some very good ones in North Carolina and in South Dakota. And they have some of the best feldspars there are. Now, I think maybe at this point, I will tell you about feldspar itself. And to do that, I've made up these tetrahedrons. Actually, these are all the same things I used when I talked about quartz a couple years ago. And in terms of quartz, the main ingredient is a silicate. This silicate has a silicon atom in the center and an oxygen on each corner. Oxygen would like to share, it would like to grab 2 electrons from somebody. But in the case of silicon, each oxygen only gets 1 from each silica atom. Silica has 4, so you end up with 4 oxygens attached to it. Okay, now I'll tell you about this one here next, because these aren't, it shouldn't be the same size, but I wasn't about to make them because I didn't know what size to make them anyway. But the silver one on top is aluminum, okay? And it has 3 oxygens attached to it. And aluminum has 3 electrons to share. But again, it only shares 1 of the electrons with each oxygen atom. And when you get into the, let's say, the messier, less valuable feldspars, and this represents iron, which also has the valence of 3, and it has 3 oxygens attached to it. And these are lower quality feldspars. But the way a feldspar crystal is put together is you take 3 of these and 1 of these. And that will give you 15 electrons, 15 oxygen atoms that are only used half. But if you start putting them together, then you find out you're down to basically an unreasonable number, namely 7.5. It doesn't work. So what you need to add, and this is the key ingredient, is you need to add the potassium to get the best stuff. Okay, so here's a potassium over here. It has a valence, it has 1 electron. Here's an oxygen over here. It wants 2. So if you put 1 of these with 1 of these, you got 1 extra left over. That makes 8. And that will give you the formula for feldspar, which basically is 3 of these, or 1 of these, and something from the very reactive element on the far left with an oxygen. And when it's potassium, that's valuable stuff. When it's sodium, it's still valuable stuff. So anyway, the pegmatite I will talk a little about first is the one that is in South Paris that, and eventually after mining it for many years and selling ground up powdered feldspar, pure white stuff, they ran into a beryl crystal in this one particular mine. And the beryl crystal they ran into was 18 feet long and about this big around. And that was the world record for a while. Okay, that was the largest crystal anybody had ever seen. And of course, it came out in pieces. That's not exactly what you would call a thumbnail. Subsequently, there was another pegmatite in South Dakota that yielded a spodumene crystal. Now, that's not the beryllium, that's the lithium. The lithium is in the first column, beryllium is the second column. Okay, those two light metals represented some serious money. Anyway, the spodumene crystal was 22 feet long and 6 feet across. And those were probably the largest crystals for at least 100 years until they discovered those 40-foot selenite crystals that have no intrinsic value, but they're big and they're underground in Mexico somewhere. So those are the current record is 40 feet, but of something that nobody wants anyway. So anyway, these large crystals are more valuable than the feldspar. And the mining has shifted away from one to include the feldspar, but to also go for the beryllium and the lithium. And I'll get to some numbers on that. Okay, what else is it about feldspars? Okay, I mentioned that the good stuff is 3 of these and 1 of these. But what happens is that when you have a pegmatite, whatever's in the melt is what you're going to get. And if it's got a lot of potassium and not too much iron, not too much of the other stuff, anyway, you get something that's called a different name. I'll just set this up here. Put this in the bag. Okay, so if you have greater than 55% of these guys and a little bit of this and not much of this at all, you get the most valuable pegmatite. And it's called a felsic pegmatite. And that's the kind of material that are the home of both the largest beryl and the largest spodumene crystals. Now, if it drops down to about 45%, it's called mafic. And that means that, among other things, it's probably got a lot of iron in it. Now, iron is not only heavier, but if it's got iron in it, it probably has some other things that are heavier. So if we go back here for a second, there's another one in here called calcium, right here. Calcium tends to go with the iron. And that really messes up the quality of the feldspar as far as making fine bone china, fine china, not bone china. By the way, I mentioned, I'll skip right now and just say bone china is made out of 2 parts ground up bone, 1 part K feldspar, and 1 part something else that they'll throw in to figure out how to make it look as good as they can. Okay, that's bone china. And basically you get the idea now that ceramic can be almost anything mixed together. As long as you got some feldspar in there, you grind it up, make a clay out of it, and then you fire it. And that's why feldspar is so pervasive in our world, not just coffee cups and toilet paper, but it's in computers. For instance, computer chip, when it runs, it generates heat, but it has to be mounted on something. It's mounted on a piece of ceramic. The ceramic has to have special properties. That is, it has to have the property that it expands, it contracts with the chip at the same rate. Otherwise, they come loose and you're screwed. Okay, so they can make ceramics with all kinds of varieties of added stuff in them. And they'll end up with a unique ceramic for a unique property. If you have seen the latest, there are frying pans that have a white coating on them that are ceramic. And I don't know how they do it, but that ceramic doesn't come loose. The aluminum certainly expands, but the ceramic stays with it. It's a very, very hard surface and very durable. And I don't know, they've only been out about 10 years. How many people have a ceramic frying pan at home? You like them? Yeah, me too. I have a small one about this big that's white, and you don't need soap or anything. You just need something to scrape it off, and then rinse it and dry it.
You can wipe it out.
Wipe it out. Okay, so that's some of the uses of ceramics. The prices of those things were around, any of these numbers I give you are suspect because it's a commodity and the prices go up and down like yo-yos. But back in the 30s, it was around $15 for a ton of crushed feldspar. Nowadays, it's much more, of course. I'm not sure if I have a chart on that or not, but I did want to mention some more things here. I don't know why they couldn't come up with a better name for something between felsic and mafic, but they call it intermediate. Woo. If it's below 45%, it's called ultramafic. That means it's got a lot of iron in it. You notice the 3 stars over here. And if you go to the Benson line, that turns out to be a pegmatite that was 2.5 miles long and 3/4 of a mile wide. But it did have a central area where those large crystals are. And John Sweeney, are you here? Tell them about how big that crystal is you bought at the
I have a mica crystal, and the face of the mica is roughly that big. And you can actually see the angles on it. It's most of a doormat. And that came out of the Benson mine.
So there is a pegmatite in the center of the Benson mine, and it was fabulous. And it's where I get all the mica to make all the things I've made out of mica. And that's all the things that I've made out of mica except the tetratoid, because I don't know how to make one of them. Yes, is that a question? No. Okay. There's probably more I should be saying about feldspar. Yes.
This one thing, I was watching a TV show the other night about Kohler toilets and how they make them, okay? And they bring in a batch of, materials from a pegmatite, and I didn't understand this at the time, but you just explained it, and that is that they have their slurry of porcelain mix, and that they cast a metal frame, and then they put the porcelain over it, over a metal frame, but the whole time that they mix up their slurry of porcelain material and the clay, they do it in a tank that has magnets in it. And so any iron that might have slipped in is getting pulled into all the pipes and into all on the sides of the slurry container itself. So, and the guy said that anything that comes out of the iron is an imperfection in the actual final white of the porcelain on the toilet. So so thank you for explaining.
There's a little bit more complication to it because the inside of that is just regular ceramic, so to speak. The porcelain glaze is a special kind of ceramic that goes on last. But basically, they get the iron where you're saying that it is, and then they put the porcelain on. Yeah. Two-step process instead of just one. Okay. So you can still make ceramics even if there's a bunch of iron in here. It just doesn't look as nice as it does normally. Also, there was a rare occasion when the K feldspars were red, and they made some very, very expensive red china dishes out of it. That's probably one of the rarest things you'll ever find with being red china. That's translucent. When you go home, you want to check your china out. The more of the extra quartz they put in, the more clarity there is. So that sometimes you would, if you use all quartz, of course, you get glass. You can look right through it. But if you manipulate your mix so that you've got some quartz in there with it, you might make it look so that it's more transparent. But fine china is always translucent. You should be able to get some light through it. But there won't be any light through the stuff made with the iron. It's just not there. And they still make dishes that are 3/8 of an inch thick that you see at the restaurants or diners or whatever. And usually they serve them to you, they already got a chip on them, but they don't care. They serve them to you with a chip. See, I know everybody's seen that before. I went to a restaurant a number of years in a row, and I never found two forks or knives or spoons or anything to match. And then one year I went there, and they had bought new silverware, and they all matched. Must have been saving their money for 10 years. Anyway, it's the same with dishes. Eventually, they'll get better dishes out there. Okay, now the last couple of things I want to talk about is the beryllium and the lithium. And I have a chart here for that, which I wish I could see better. You can see it, but I can't see it very well myself. But I should mention something off of the periodic chart, because when you buy beryllium, you don't buy beryllium by the pound. These elements over here are extremely reactive. These three in particular will decompose if you try to just leave them in natural air. They might even explode on you. So whenever you buy these three, you buy them as an oxide. Although sometimes the sodium is fully reduced and stored in an organic substance that doesn't react with sodium. These other ones here are usually rated according to their oxide content, but they're not usually separated. But the other three have to be separated. So when you're talking about beryllium and lithium, you're buying beryllium oxide. I'm going to walk around here so I can stand by my own chart. So here's the formula for the barrel that was in that mine in Maine. Be3Al2 Si silicon 8 oxygen 18. If you work that out, that means that these three beryllium represent 4.8%. But if you were to buy it, you would have to buy a beryllium atom, which is 9, and an oxygen atom for a total of 25. So even this way, you're only getting a small fraction in terms of what the value is. During World War II, when they started using it in aircraft, I got to find that list. That was worth, a 10-ton load was worth $55. But now it's worth about $350,000. On the other hand, we're lucky. I think there's only 3 bertrandite deposits in the world, and one of them is in Utah. Okay, it has a formula Be4. There's only 2 silicons, 7 oxygens, and an extra hydroxide, which is oxygen, and there's 2 of those. And this adds up so that you get 14.6%, 3 times as well, 3 times as much, and it's worth more money too. And you can see the numbers over there. But nowadays, that 10-ton load of bertrandite would be worth $1.9 million. A dump truck with $1.9 million worth of stuff on it. Now, I don't have the exact numbers for the lithium, but they're comparable. They're really close. The spodumene formula here, lithium, aluminum, silicate 2, and oxygen 6, is less than this even. Lithium only weighs 7, and turns out to be 14/30, which is 7/15. The ratio of how much you're actually getting, because you're buying lithium oxide by the pound. And those are the pound prices over there. Those are the prices by the pound. And, so you can see that, and the cookie here is even less. This cookie apparently is more common, but it's only got half as much stuff in it. Okay, now, I'm not going to say too much about gems because I've already told you that whatever is in the belt is what you get. So some pegmatites don't have anything and some do. But the key here is that in order for these expensive gems to form, they have to have a place to grow. And that means that as the pegmatite is growing these immense crystals, there has to be some water around, and the remaining minerals that are not used accumulate in this extremely hot water in solution, and they crystallize out into eventually what becomes pockets after the water disappears. So whatever you get, depends on what's in there. Now, I would like to look up the aircraft usages in World War II, if I can find that list. And in the meantime, while I'm looking for it, I'll entertain some questions if there's anybody has questions. Oh, no questions, huh?
We got more organized.
I was organized 2 years ago.
I guess we keep rescheduling him.
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't know where this stuff is, but hey, it was 2 pages worth apart. All right, let's try this file.
So Dave, is the reactivity of the lithium, is that why when I tried to replace the battery in my iPhone that it burst into flames?
Well, you're one of those, huh?
Well, I can't give you an answer to that, but it is an extremely reactive metal, and it has to be associated with something to contain that extra electron. And if it doesn't have anything there, almost anything can happen. So
I use lithium aluminum hydride in a chemical reaction. I had to use a portion of it. The problem with lithium aluminum hydride, when it's in a jar, it dries out. You got to break it up into a kind of a powder. So if you work on it too much with a spatula, it'll start to glow. And then after it starts to glow, you'll shoot a flame out. Here it is, the jar is down here on the top. Shoots out a flame like this. And if you have any Bunsen burners going at the same time in that room, they all turn red. This is an experience you really don't want to enjoy.
I found a list for what mica was used for, in addition to the things that everybody knows. And I already mentioned it's electrical insulators, also used for fireproofing, thermal insulation, and gaskets. And nowadays we use rubber, plastic, and all kinds of other stuff for gasket material, but gaskets. And it was used as a filler in paint. And it added translucency to paint. So, I still haven't found the aircraft stuff, but. There. Let's just say that when you put beryllium with copper, you get a spring that's durable, weldable, and doesn't wear out.
Hey, Dave, is vermiculite related to mica? It's a soil additive, or is it another creature?
It's both a man-made substance and something you can find out in the wild. When I've seen it in Arizona, when I've seen it in Arizona, It looked like it had mica in it.
Hmm.
I couldn't tell them apart, to tell you the truth, but they make vermiculite nowadays, so I don't know what to tell you about that. Oh, I know, the beryllium is also used for armor plating. And anytime you have high rev machines, anything that moves very rapidly, you use that because it can stand the heat. Beryllium, not beryllium itself, but beryllium compounds. I don't know where that list is. Forget it. Okay, I'm done.
Are there any pegmatites that are like still developing now, or are they all done their thing?
There's millions of them out there. They're still being developed. It's a commodity kind of thing, like I mentioned before. Prices go up and down. Obviously, the pegmatite mine called the Benson mine has stopped, but that was producing just iron. But
I think you're asking a different question though. You're asking, are they still forming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, it's still growing.
Or-
Oh, you mean geologically?
Yeah.
It takes a while. I wouldn't wait for it if I were you.
Well, is one close to being done?
No, it takes too long for them to grow for us humans to watch it. But there's millions of them around.
So are there any local, Dave? Any in the state besides the Benson mine?
There was an article written in one of the newsletters. I'm not sure if it was in this newsletter for this club or not, but it was written by a guy who described the 25 largest pegmatites in New York State. And they tend to be in clusters of 5 or 6 together, but they're scattered all over. And Benson mine was one. That was by itself. I believe there was a feldspar mine. Wasn't it called the Lee Moonstone mine? Anybody go back to the 70s? Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an area where there was 5 or 6
Something near Lake
pegmatites up
Placid.
there. Yeah, north of Lake Placid somewhere.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they are, but if they're K feldspars, they probably got enough value out of them. You know, it amounts to the price of the stuff, whether you want to pump the water on and keep digging down deeper. Most of these pegmatites, though, are lenticular. Does everybody know what lenticular means? I learned about it the hard way. Lenticular means it's lens shaped. It's shaped like this, like a convex lens. So the one up in South Paris was 400 yards long and probably about the same depth, and 50 yards wide. 400 yards in a circle and 50 yards across. And it had an 18-foot barrel crystal in it. And it had smaller barrel crystals in it as well.
Where is this located?
Somewhere near South Paris.
Paris, France.
South
No.
Paris, Spain.
Oh, okay.
The town of South Paris.
Oh, because the reason I was asking is because I had went up to West Paris, Maine, and there's a family that owns a bunch of mines up there. That they also own a rock shop, and if you go to the rock shop, what's it? Yes, yeah. If you stop there, you get a map, and then the map shows you where these mines are. And they're not that far from the actual shop that they have, and it was very interesting. And
Yeah,
we went up there and collected.
that's a big cluster of them there. Maine had a really big cluster, and there was some really big ones out in South Dakota, and there's quite a few of them in North Carolina also. But I believe there's some in Virginia. Is there a place in Virginia that produces?
Yeah, there's Amelia Courthouse, which is just north of Richmond.
Yeah,
And I used
that
to
may
go
only be
there.
1 or 2 though.
They have a lot of amazonite there. A lot of really
Amazonite,
nice
yeah.
sky blue amazonite, and they had a lot of beryl there too, like really nice beryl crystals. And obviously a lot of mica. I think that was originally a mica mine, like you said. It was, you know,
Does anybody know if the Ruggles mine was a pegmatite? That would be New Hampshire, not Maine. I don't know either.
Well, thank you, Dave.
Welcome.
Thanks, Dave.
Did everybody get your Kraken cab, one of the versions or both? Because we're celebrating our 70th anniversary this month. And there were several articles in here about all the history of the club and what was going on over the years. Our show first started in Mondor's, I call it Mondor's Auto Auction.
That sounds like the right.
You had some other name I couldn't figure
Fayetteville
out.
or something.
Down in what? Now,
Nedrow.
some people said it was Nedrow. I have
Yeah,
never
Nedrow.
been there.
That was Fayetteville. wasn't
Didn't
it?
Dick Steiner live down that way?
Yes,
Nedrow.
Nedrow, south of Syracuse.
I know, but it was south of what we consider Nedrow now, up on Route 11 on the way to Fayette. We always called it Fayette. Set on the right-hand side of Route 11, up on the hill after you went through Nedrow.
Oh, okay. Up on the,
Remember that?
vaguely.
Man, am I old.
I tried to Google it. I couldn't come up with it.
I don't know, did Mary, you want to make any comments about your report? Some of you've got her report listing all the dealers who have paid us something. Some 50, I think there was one more, one of our psychics, Serena.
Sunshine, who I wrote check out to give them the money back, and then they wrote us back and said, no, we're actually gonna come.
Jim Marcy.
Yep.
Sunshine, yeah. Jim said, well, I know for sure they're gonna have one in Ohio. So I can't be in yours. I'd like to have you send back the money. So I sent her an email to send the money back to him for his booth. And before she even sent out the check, he sends me an email and says, it's closed, canceled. The one in Ohio has been canceled for the second weekend of July. And that's after they postponed it from an earlier date. Now I heard from Dave tonight that Shahana, they're showing Wilcox,
Wysox,
Wysock.
WYSOX.
I don't know, I do,
Anyway, it's scheduled for the, I don't know how the calendar was, the 8th and 9th,
October,
October 8th and 9th or something like that. 7th, 8th and 9th, 8th.
I don't know if I got, no, I haven't got a
You can
calendar.
look it up on the calendar if you want.
So, well, that may not happen. Maybe that'll be canceled too eventually.
Well, I got the idea that they already confirmed it with the place where it was held.
Yeah,
But, you know, who knows?
that's the Pennsylvania governor and he follows our New York governor.
I have a few door prizes yet.
You
I
have,
need to take them home. I'm getting ready to leave.
we were thinking about having our April meeting be an auction, but probably there won't be very many showing up and therefore there'll be a lot of stuff left over. So we'll probably need a speaker for May, but I noticed our vice president left. Maybe I'll find him for that. I'll find him for that one. And I guess he's not gonna talk about field trips because he's not here.
Wayne County's got a field trip.
To on April Fools,
The first Saturday, is that April Fool's Day?
April 1st, Ace of Diamonds.
Ace of Diamonds.
It's always April Fools. I've been there when it was snowing, raining, wind blowing. I stayed there maybe a couple hours. I said, that's it. I'm not that nuts. So I left. But you probably all know the Buffalo show has been canceled, postponed until next year. Johnson City says they're gonna have one in April, 10th and 11th. I don't know. I don't know if you're aware of the major buildings of the state fair are being used for the vaccine. The expo center is you can get a shot there at 4 o'clock in the morning. Johnson and Johnson from 6 a.m. back to 10 p.m. They're doing the Johnson and Johnson shot. So I think some people got to time at 2 o'clock in the morning for that. But during the day, it's the other ones. I guess they're going to be giving up. But they're using the horticulture building and using the Center of Progress for storage. And I think they're being reserved until October right now. So that takes care of any shows going on, takes care of the car show, takes care of the state fair. So I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to be talking about having another show meeting on the 29th of March. Maybe make a decision then. The management at the state fair, the guys, their hands are tied. It's whatever the governor decides. Well, who our current governor is, decides what's going to happen to the state fair. I don't know. But somewhere along the line, we got to draw the line and say, okay, we're not going to have what we're going to have because we have to put things in place. Advertising, insurance for the security guys. Lots of things have to go on. Right now, we only have one dealer who said, no, I'm not coming. But that was back several weeks ago when people were not getting shots. Now we're over 100 million plus now countrywide.
Yeah.
So maybe they say by our president saying by what, May, everybody who wants a shot is going to get one. But May is cutting it real close to that 60-day period prior to July. And of course, we're sponsoring the Eastern Federation Convention. So we have to find a place for the motel rooms and the convention meetings and so on. So I don't know, we're kind of all up in the air. As Dave mentioned, April Fools, you can all go on your own to the Ace of Diamonds. And oh yes, and Herkimer Diamond Gem Show is supposedly in July 17th, the 18th, the weekend after ours.
They just started advertising it. And there's 2 shows. Finger Lakes is putting on a show.
Rochester.
Canandaigua in May, and then Corning again in April.
They're running 2 of them, one in Corning and then
Canandaigua.
in Canada at the arena. Because
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
It's kind of to the west of,
Yeah.
as I recall. But, I've done a few other things, stained glass, besides collecting coin. If you really need a speaker for next month, I can talk about the West Point Mint Quarters. Are you all familiar with West Point Mint Quarters?
Dave, would you like to speak next month?
Well, we got a few minutes left. The West Point Mint, this past 2019, up to that point, they were minting commemorative coins that you could buy through the U.S. Mint, and they're minting them there at the West Point Mint, right there by the Academy. Okay. San Francisco does the same thing, except they put an S on their coins when they go into circulation. But most of the coins, San Francisco coins with an S on them, go into the mint sets where you pay a premium for lots of money. Or the proof coins, or the commemorative coins, you can spend as much as you want. You can buy gold coins if you want to the U.S. Mint. But the West Point, starting in the beginning of 2019, they're National Park Series, okay? Are you all familiar with the National Park Series? That was what followed the States Series. So go back to 2009, you'll see these coins with the states, special scene from each one of the 50 states. Well, they started going to the national parks starting in 2019, but then West Point Mint decided to produce 2 million coins with a W on them, the quarters, that is. Okay. So then they sent 1 million to the Philadelphia Mint, and they sent 1 million of each of those to the Denver mint, and those mints mixed them in with their P&Ds, okay, quarters, and put them out into circulation, okay? That's the only way you can find them, in circulation, okay? You can't buy the West Point mint quarters from the US Mint, okay? So they put them out in the circulation. So when you go through your coin, or when you get from whatever the bank, or when you're, you know, you might find a W in there. Well, the chances are of finding one of the 2 million out of what, 260 million plus quarters is pretty slim, okay? But you can go to eBay for what's interesting you can go to eBay and look up US Mint West Point quarters, and you'll see all the places that are selling them for $29, $30, $50, $80 a piece. Okay? The key to that is you got to be crazy enough to order a skid, actually a crate of quarters from US Mint, either from Denver or from Philadelphia, okay? 200,000 quarters in that crate. It's a heavy plastic bag that's in a, not wooden crate, I guess it's heavy duty plastic composite crate. And they'll deliver it to you wherever you want it for $1,500. So you get 200,000 quarters, which probably in there is West Point quarters going through from 2019 on. So these guys, they got 30 people or more in their warehouse, whatever, going through thousands and thousands of quarters, pulling them out, and then they're selling them on eBay for anywhere from, some of them are now going down to less than $10, just under $10 a piece, plus shipping for $5 or whatever. So that's where they get their, it doesn't cost $5 to ship a quarter. Give me a break.
Is this why all these merchants are saying they don't have change?
Yeah.
Well, there's been a problem with the chain between the Federal Reserve and Brinks and personnel to deliver, especially the one for last year, the last part of National Park was hard to find. I finally bought one on eBay because I couldn't find it. But they stopped in 2020 was the last one. The one this year, which is, you may have seen some of them coming out now, it's called the Tuskegee Airman. It's the last one that came out in February this year. But no West Point quarters were produced for that one. Just the Denver, Philadelphia, and San Francisco ones that you can get. Now there's a deal in Liverpool where you can get the San Francisco ones from, and he sells them for $1 a piece.
You said those have got an S on them?
San Francisco has an S on them.
Is it for San Francisco or Sanctuary City?
San Francisco, Charles.
Which mint did you order your skid from?
There is a guy in Syracuse, the dealer, Mark, over in Liverpool. I don't know if you're familiar with his coin shop right on Old Liverpool Road. And Old Liverpool Road, little hole-in-the-wall shop. Not too far from where, what's it near, the Dollar General? Yeah.
Didn't know about it.
And he said one local guy did get a crate of 200,000 quarters. Took him forever to go through them all.
So how long did it take you to go through them all?
Now I've been through about 66,000 quarters since the beginning of last year.
Good grief.
66,000 quarters I've gone through myself. And I get $500, $600, $800 a time from the banks. The last few months, I've been hardly getting any. All I've been getting is what they call recycled quarters. It's the old stuff mixed in with a little bit of the new. I call it recycled. It's not brand new. I used to get boxes of brand new quarters from the Philadelphia Mint, all brand new. And I have found, how many? Out of all the ones I went through, I think I found, a couple hundred quarters of West Point quarters. And I bet you're not going to bring those in for us to see. No, I sold them already. I sold them to a guy in Ann Arbor, several of them. I sold them to Mark over in Liverpool. And the rest of them I sold to a guy who's crazy enough to buy them all. Is that my phone?
I think so.
That's a text message. Forget it. Soliciting my,
Quarters.
2 quarters.
and the rest of them I sold them all, but I only sold them for $2.50 a piece. $2.50 a
Yeah,
piece.
but how much did you charge your shipping and handling?
Nothing, because I delivered them. No charge. But anyways, that's my speech for next month.